Alrighty. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on what in Auckland is certainly a disappointingly classic spring day with lots of rain and lots of wind going around. My name is Sylvie Thrushmarsh. I'm MyHR's Chief Evangelist based in Auckland, and we're going to be talking about thriving through the holidays today in a format that is slightly different to the ones that we have done before. So, as you know, a little bit of housekeeping. Let me just click over. Make sure I can jump through. As always, the session will be recorded today. So if you need to duck away to take a call, or if you, for whatever reason, want to revisit it or think it could be a useful resources for others, you'll have access to the recording. That's totally cool. What this does mean, of course, is if you have questions to ask, they'll be answered in a public setting. So if you want to keep things anonymous, we'd encourage you to use the anonymous function in the Q&A section. Or if we do get questions come through that have information that could be a little bit specific or a bit identifying, we'll just make sure that we scrub it when we ask and answer the questions. So slides will be available afterwards. We do also have some bonus resources I'll talk about a bit later. And of course, as with all our webinars, towards the end, we should have 10 or 15 minutes time for some Q&As to come through. So the way that we'll manage those is during the session, please feel free to pop your question in. We'll collect them all together and answer them at the end of the webinar, just so we can kind of keep the flow going and make sure we're keeping to time. And because we're doing an international webinar today with my colleagues from Australia and Canada, if you have questions for anyone in particular, just say it's for Sylvie, or it's for the New Zealand lady, or it's for Australia, or it's for Canada, it's for Nicole or for Julie. And when we get there, we'll make sure that I'm not answering Canadian questions and Nicole isn't answering New Zealand questions. So before we get to introductions, just a little bit about what we'll cover off today. We'll talk about who I am and who Nicole and who Julie are, and we'll talk about where your business is at this time of year and what is it that you need to plan for as we come into the end of the year with the holiday season and the Christmas season for many of us. We'll talk about events and parties, what you need to be thinking about, what you might want to avoid as we think about people celebrating and getting together in large numbers at the end of the year. We'll just have a bit of a word about being mindful about the fact that this isn't a happy time for everyone, some of the cultural stuff you want to consider, some encouragement from us, I guess, to reflect and reset as you think about 2025, the year that's been, and getting ready for 2026 ahead. And then, of course, that Q&A piece towards the end, if there's anything, if you've got any burning questions that you'd like us to address. But without further ado, let me introduce who we have today, because we're doing things slightly differently to how we normally do. Every country in the world has a holiday season coming up, whether that's hot and sunny in New Zealand and Australia, or cooler and snowy in Canada. So we thought that we would pull together our country manager, Nicole from Australia, and our country manager, Julie from Canada, as well as myself, to run the session today. So I'll be doing the first bit of the webinar. I'll then hand over to them for them to spend some time talking to different slides. But a really quick introduction piece from us in terms of who we are, and this is who will be talking to you today. So Nicole, lovely to collaborate with you on this webinar. Thank you so much for joining us at an earlier time in Australia than it is in New Zealand. To kick us off, did you have a favourite family tradition of yours at this time of year?
Thanks, Sylvie. Great to be here. Hello, everybody. I'm still on my first morning coffee somewhere there. There we are. And I'm sorry to say, but it's really sunny and beautiful in Sydney. So I hope I get some sun shortly. Favorite holiday tradition, putting up the Christmas tree. The girls have been asking me to get started on that for a couple of weeks now. Traditionally, I like to put it up on the 1st of December. But I think we're going to go a few weeks early this year because, everyone's been asking non-stop. And one of our children doesn't have a concept of in a couple of weeks. She thinks that's tomorrow. Our youngest is needing things done right now. Hopefully everyone else is a bit more patient. Thanks, Sylvie. Good to be here.
Thanks, Nicole. Good luck with getting that tree set up. And Julie, likewise, thanks for joining us from British Columbia today. Did you have a favourite thing about this time of year? Obviously, your seasons are quite different to us in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I have had a summer Christmas before in New Zealand, and it feels so different to have warm weather at Christmas. Obviously, we have cold and dark at Christmas, and one of my favorite things to do is to put the Christmas lights up. So that's very big, obviously, in the Northern Hemisphere. So I like to get those up as early as possible. I'll probably do them this weekend. Because it really brightens up the dark nights. And I remember the Christmas lights shining in my window when I was a kid. So it's very much something that makes me feel like the season is upon us.
Thanks, Julie. This will be our first Christmas with a little one ourselves, so we're having to think about actually putting some energy into decorating the house. And I think he's going to go ballistic over lights hanging out from all our doors and windows. But
Exactly.
something we're looking forward to as well. Nice one. Well, Nicole and Julie will come back to you in a few slides to let you bring in sort of the Australia and New Zealand and Canadian aspect. As well, there are obviously some things that each country has that's unique to its holiday period. For New Zealand, that's things like public holidays and close downs. Same for Canada and for Australia. Excuse me. So we will spend some time speaking to specifically what each country needs to be aware of for those who've joined us from those countries in particular. But let's get cracking and get into things. So it's already the season. If you're like me and saw Christmas decorations going up in the shops a couple of weeks ago and just got an absolute shock that it was already November, you're certainly not alone. Every year seems to go faster and faster. And we've all been working really, really hard in 2025. I know there's been enormous projects going on amongst our client base. So I thought it would be useful for us to take a moment to plan and prepare, thinking about what the year has brought us and then what it is that we're looking for the year ahead. So thank you for making time for this webinar. Obviously, it's all a part of that planning process. So we know it's Christmas and the holiday season. For plenty of people, that's a really special time. Like Nicole and Julie and myself, you've got family traditions or things that you're really looking forward to. For others, it might be a difficult time if they've got some grief around the season or if they're not as connected to family and their loved ones right now. It can be a time when people are carrying a bit more sadness than they might otherwise be. Work-wise, for some of us, it's a quiet time. I know that I'm looking forward to 2 weeks off over Christmas and the New Year period. For others, they are absolutely rammed and getting ready for a seasonal gear up, whether that's the ski fields in Vancouver, whether it's the hospitality and tourism businesses in New Zealand and Australia. The pace of work can be very different depending on what industry you're in. So today's session, we have something for everyone. Again, questions, flick them through. We'd love to hear from you. These sessions really do come alive when it's not just myself and Nicole and Julie talking to ourselves in a group. We'd love to hear from you in terms of some of the things that you're facing and any guidance or advice you'd like to hear from us. So even if you're working in one business, there might be a few different work scenarios that you're planning for. The first would be people who are checking out, taking some time off. Certainly in the MyHR world, we run a skeleton staff and some of us are looking forward to time off and others of us will be covering the phones while our colleagues are away. So if this is you, if a bunch of people are going to be leaving your business for a period of time, make sure they've done a good handover. If you do have a skeleton crew working, make sure that they're aware of any health and safety requirements, make sure that they are clear on what's expected of them kind of during the time away. Make sure that everyone's leave who's leaving the business has been approved for and managed. So you're not trying to frantically sort payroll on the 23rd of December and trying to contact people who are barbecuing at the beach or away in a cabin and on a retreat. And obviously that any out of office emails have been set, all that kind of stuff. If it's useful, write yourself a checklist, kind of work through it over the next few weeks. Most people are pretty clear what their plans are and looking forward to them. But if you do have people who are checking out, obviously make sure that their absence is managed. Now, you might have that skeleton crew who are working and maybe they don't have as much to do at other times in the year. Potentially you have customers who are taking time away even if your business is still working. So if you do have people who are available who are on call and maybe don't have as many requests or as many things to do, check if they've got projects they can pick up for stuff that you just haven't got to over the course of the year. And now it's really important to make use of that time. If they've got any kind of excess annual leave that you want them to be using or vacation time, make sure that they are taking some of it if and when kind of days allow. Sometimes if you've got people who are sort of in our world, in the MyHR world, working that skeleton staff, we often say if the day hasn't been busy, you can leave a couple of hours early. There's nothing worse in New Zealand than staring at a gorgeous summer afternoon outside. You've not had any calls or any emails for anyone for 4 hours and you've got another hour and a half on the clock to go. So if you can have that level of flexibility, that might just keep morale up for people who are having to work when all of their colleagues are off. And if they don't have all that busy work to keep them kind of frantically running, that could be a good time to earn some goodwill. Lastly, of course, you've got people who are working and are frantic. So tourism operators in New Zealand, restaurants, accommodation facilities, certainly in New Zealand and kind of other parts of the country and the regions where all of the mass cities, the cities have a mass exodus out to those regions. They've got a lot going on. So make sure you are planning for those busy days and supporting your staff. That could look like regular check-ins. That could look like an all-hands meeting every morning just to check that everything's set up and ready to go for the day. Any health and safety issues, any concerns have been flagged. And if you need to, potentially you can reassign some of your back office staff to the front line if that would be useful. Answering phones, being available to help customers who are coming in when it's really busy, any of that kind of stuff will make sure your business is more prepared to handle the influx of seasonal work than you might otherwise be.
Sylvia, I could probably add a little bit to that there, that idea of, your office staff going out to your front line. When I worked for Whistler Blackcomb, a very big ski hill, obviously, on the west coast of North America, we really had it sort of mandated that during the busiest sort of 10 days of the year, that the office staff would have some shifts that they would work on the front line. And it was such a great way to have those people that were really busting their butt, providing that great guest service, feel supported by the back of house. I think it still continues today, and it would be everyone from the senior leaders right through to your coordinator level. So it was a really effective way to create culture and to actually provide the support that was needed. So just a little example there.
And Julie, did you find that by having people from the office kind of jump in and do work they wouldn't otherwise, did you find that that really built up an empathy and an understanding of different parts of the business? You alluded to that company culture piece.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I ended up being a busser during that time of year, and I was like, wow, this is actually really hard work when the ski lodge is filled and busy. And it also meant I connected with people that I wouldn't normally connect with, right? So I got to meet a whole bunch of employees that I wouldn't normally connect with. So, yeah, it served a number of different purposes, but I could see it being really helpful, even in just a regular coffee shop, right? You cover that middle break when it's a couple of hours that are really busy in the part of the day. It really builds that camaraderie.
And of course, if you aren't able to reassign people from your back office, you might be looking at hiring some casual or some seasonal employees. So if it's a busy season, most years in New Zealand, we have a summer, or certainly we have Christmas and New Year's every year. This probably isn't a new trading period for your business unless you're sort of brand new this year. So if you do have casual and seasonal people you're planning on hiring, getting ahead of it now can be really useful. The schools have just finished, I think, kind of final exams for New Zealand's national education system are wrapping up this week. I imagine it would be pretty similar in Australia. I'm getting some nodding from Nicole. So you've potentially got a bunch of students who are now looking ahead to their summer and figuring out what's next. Likewise, a lot of the universities have wrapped up, and so there is a potential pool of candidates who might not have been there in sort of September, October, but now we're coming to the tail end of the year. There's that pool of people that you might be able to draw from. So when you are bringing people into your business temporarily, make sure that you are thinking about effective ways to onboard. Don't assume that just because they're here temporarily, you can take shortcuts or cut corners here. Often it's more important to put time and energy into onboarding because they are only here for a short time. They kind of don't have the opportunity to learn by watching their colleagues, to kind of pick up on things by osmosis. Having a really tight, robust onboarding process is going to be it's going to be quite critical for getting these people up and running quickly. Where you can, a buddy system can work really well. Having someone who can show you the ropes, who can answer those quick questions, so you're not having to flick through a handbook trying to find the answer, can be really useful. So if you do have the capacity to have potentially senior members of your team buddy up with your newer seasonal or casual staff, that can be a really effective way to manage some of those onboarding frictions as you bring a whole bunch of new people into your team. Of course, we also need to think about getting rosters and scheduling right. And it wouldn't be an HR webinar without talking about compliance and making sure that your paperwork is all in order. So for Canada, you're thinking about scheduling on staff holidays, you're thinking about fixed term agreements. Julie, was there anything you wanted to add here in terms of kind of critical onboarding pieces for people in your world?
No, I mean, I think our stat holiday pay is really expensive when people are actually working on the stat holiday. So, not that you're trying to take it away from people, but if you do need to add more people, it's a great time to add casual people that wouldn't receive the stat because they hadn't worked 30 days, 15 of the previous 30 days. And those younger, employees or students, that's probably not an issue so much. So really thinking about who's working on your stat holiday is really important. And I like to see those fixed term agreements so we know when these actual end date, and we know that we're not carrying people through or being unclear about what the work period is. So just two pieces there for me.
And Nicole, in terms of Australia's priorities or Australia's kind of fish hooks to be aware of, what would you add to those comments there?
Awesome. Definitely the Modern Award compliance piece. So making sure that you're across the Modern Award applicable for your business and understanding what overtime applies on public holidays, and what payments you're making for each type of employee. Some Modern Awards do have an age reference, so junior versus adult employee, like the retail award, and making sure you're across those during a busy time, especially if you're hiring casuals. And then lastly, just being mindful of staying really across the true definition of a casual employee in Australia, and what that means from a regular shift or regular rostering point of view, and what that means in terms of offboarding them after Christmas as well.
Nice. I'm so glad you're both here because I would not be able to speak with any level of confidence or information to to those requirements. Look, for New Zealand, it's pretty similar, right? So hiring casual employees over summer is pretty typical. Certainly, you want to be mindful that if they are engaged for a set period of time, say from the 1st of December to the 31st of January, if you find that they're amazing and you want to keep them in your business beyond that period of time, you are very unlikely to be able to maintain them as a casual unless they truly are only working as and when required and don't have any set hours. So, like Australia, we've got some pretty key requirements around what a casual is and what a casual isn't. There are plenty of resources on the myhr.work site if this is something of concern to you, but you can always get in touch to have a conversation about it. And again, just that summer scaling piece, be mindful about what it can do to the culture and the vibe of the business if you have 20 new people flooding in or 200 people flooding in, as some of our hospitality clients are managing. So be thoughtful for your existing team who are going to be there cleaning up the confetti on the 4th of January and making sure that as the team of seasonal staff kind of roll out, everyone's still feeling connected to the business and not feeling like it's just been a complete typhoon of new changes and new people. And look, it's a fun time of year. There's a lot that you can do with company culture and recognition that doesn't require a glamorous super yacht kind of Christmas party experience. So if you've got a Secret Santa, make sure that you're giving appropriate gifts and setting expectations around that. If you can bring in donuts one day for a treat and kind of be bringing in the hot chocolates and the mulled wine, make sure you're working alongside your staff to kind of get anything done that needs to happen before those state holidays and public holidays kind of click in. Anything you can do there is going to add to the feeling of connectedness at this time of year and certainly alleviate the stress for people who are having to work through and pushing things along. So at this point, we'll hand over to my fabulous colleague, Nicole, to talk about taking care of your people and yourself and thinking about next steps with your Christmas planning. I will talk to you all again soon.
Thanks, Sylvie. Just really building from the last piece, which is around businesses who are coming up to a busy season and busy period. And this is really applicable for you if you have a busy period at any point in time throughout the year, not just for a busy season. But we really wanted to call out the importance of taking care of your people and of yourself. And how important it is to think about planning ahead of this period and time of year. And I think we alluded to it with Sylvie earlier, but prioritizing those conversations that really bring role clarity, especially when you're onboarding new employees and your team is growing temporarily. Who's working on what, who's responsible for what. We find it's during those periods of time that things fall into what I call the accountability gap. I thought you were doing it, I thought she was doing it, and nobody does it. So role clarity when you have a busy period is really important. Who's doing what? Who is responsible for it? Who's accountable for it? How will we know it's been done? And with that is a really important call out for safety and well-being. It's during those busy times, and I'm thinking about hospitality and retail where we're running a little bit frantic, we're probably walking a little bit too fast, we're walking past that box and not putting it away. So reminding our team and ourselves that safety and well-being is equally important at any given point in time, but it's more important when we're busy. And it's when we're busy that things start to slip, walking past that box or saying it's okay that someone yelled because they're busy and they're under pressure. It's okay that they raise their voice. It's not okay. And you need to role model and lead the way. by being really mindful of both physical aspects of when we talk about safety and the psychosocial hazards or the mental health part of it. So, being busy and giving someone permission to raise their voice is not how you want to lead your business during this period of business. You want to keep the energy up, but you want to also be mindful of the importance of having some downtime alongside that too. And with that comes connection. And so taking the time to connect, and I know we've just talked about onboarding seasonal employees and casual employees, getting to know them and getting them to helping them understand who you are as a business owner or as a leader or who your team are, building that connection, even if it's with someone that's going to be in your business for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. That's really important because their first impression is the most important impression. And even as they leave you after a few weeks, you want them to say great things about your organization. You want them to have a great experience and you want them to feel part of the team and that they belong. So with that said, it's really important to think ahead. One tip or one trick I find really important during busy time is to take either 5 minutes in the morning or 30 minutes before the week starts. It's either on, say, Monday morning or a Sunday evening or a Friday afternoon even, and just kind of think ahead. I find that really useful during those peak periods. And I think about it from a reflective point of view or forward thinking. I'm, imagining I'm now at the end of that next week or the end of next month or end of December. What did success look like? What could have gone wrong or what could go wrong? What could go right? How will I know, what do I need to plan to make sure that things go right? What do I need to get it right? And who do I need to do it with me? We often overlook the who do I need. And when we're busy, we run solo and we forget to ask for help, or we forget to bring people on the journey with a change to the menu or a change to the plan, or something's happening in the warehouse. We forget to tell people. So I'm just taking that minute and taking a step back and thinking, what am I changing for the week and who do I need to tell? And making sure that your communication is on lock so that you can smash out the week and the busy period ahead. And so with that said, if you see behavior that seems out of character, just check in. It's not just about letting that behavior go and, forgiving inappropriate behavior, but it's also not about going straight to a disciplinary, obviously if that bad behavior has been happening on a regular basis, of course you need to escalate and take it to a formal approach. But there's a place in the middle, which is just I'm just checking in. You seem, you did this thing this morning, which is a little bit out of character, not usually yourself. What can I do? What is going on? What do you need? Just checking in is important, and find out what's going on and how you can help. Next slide, please. Thank you. Parties and events. Thanks for allocating this one to me. Let's talk about parties and events. And of course, I love a good party. So on our behalf, we do recommend, and we mentioned it a few slides ago, having time to just unwind, let your hair down, have those parties, have those events, celebrate the year that was. And you can do it in a big or a small way. It just, as long as it's matching your budget. But remembering that a thank you can go a long way, and it's free and it's often overlooked. So taking a moment, in the previous slide, we talked about the importance of reflecting. Think about, who do I need to thank? How have I thanked them? How do they like to be thanked? Is it in an all hands meeting? Is it a private message? Not everyone wants to be treated the same. Not everyone likes the fanfare. So think about how you sort of celebrate the year that was in a way that really connects with each one of your team members personally. Whatever you do as far as parties and events go, please do it safely. And remember, as a host, if you're hosting an event, you have health and safety obligations across all 3 countries. And I'll invite Julie and Sylvie to jump in and contribute to that shortly. But really, the rules are the same. Make sure that you're reminding everyone about, safe levels of drinking. And especially a big reminder in here is not to pressure, make sure that colleagues are not pressuring each other into drinking. Some people don't drink. Some people are trying to, be healthy. Some people have religious boundaries or religious beliefs that mean they do not drink. And so making sure that we respect all our differences is quite important at those events. And finally, making sure that you get your people home safely. If you are hosting an event, you are responsible for getting them, back home or back to the office if it's a daytime event, safely from the venue that you're hosting your event at, because you're paying for it as a company. It's your responsibility. Some companies, therefore, and some of our businesses will ask us around this time of year to start writing some comms out and send some communications, whether that's an email or some talking points for your toolbox or your all hands, and outlining expectations and guardrails and reminding everyone of your company values, as well as who to speak to during the event if you need some support. Sylvie and Julie, is there anything you want to add in terms of the partying aspect of this busy period?
I think for me, I really like to see, especially as you get a little bit bigger, I like to see a couple of drink tickets versus an open bar. I think sometimes an open bar is a bit of a recipe for disaster, especially with younger team members. They might not have that opportunity all the time to have access to alcohol in an unlimited fashion. And we actually don't want that at a Christmas party. So consider having some limits on the amount of alcohol. And then I think no matter how good your messaging is and how great things are in your planning, things might go there. Things happen, right? A colleague might say something to another colleague that's inappropriate. Something might be done that's inappropriate. And the most important thing about that is that you deal with that right away, the very next day that you're having those conversations and you're sorting them out. That's the most important part about it. It doesn't always go perfectly when we bring a whole bunch of people together to socialize around the holidays. But if issues come up, you really want to deal with those right away, having those right conversations and reaffirming those boundaries and pieces afterwards. So those are kind of my 2 points on that.
Yeah, nothing to add for New Zealand beyond what you've both already spoken about. Setting expectations ahead of time can be quite useful. If it's a larger Christmas party with kind of more people, have someone who's probably from your management or leadership team to keep an eye on everyone, and ideally who isn't drinking or imbibing themselves can be quite helpful. They can often kind of spot pockets of trouble that might be coming up. They can go over and say, "Hey, I think you've had a few too many glasses of wine tonight. Shall I grab you a water and we just call it a day?" Can be quite useful to intervene before things escalate. But yeah, otherwise, all of those really sensible kind of measures and guardrails to make sure things don't get out of hand would apply in the New Zealand context too.
Thank you. I think it's over to you, Julie.
Oh, right. So I was like, back over to you, Nicole. No, back over to me. Great. So I'm going to touch briefly on, having really reflecting on who your people are and what's actually going on for them at the holiday season. So we always picture that idea of a family and people around the Christmas tree and putting lights up and making mulled wine. And it's not like that for everybody. So some things that, might come up for people is could have a recent death in the family. It could just be a really hard time of year, even if that death wasn't recent, missing family members. Obviously, on the West Coast in the tourism industry, we see lots of people that are displaced from their homes. So like they've actually come to work in Canada. So they're not around their family at that time of year. And just the idea of all these different cultures coming together, right? The Christian idea of Christmas is very strong. And sometimes it overweighs what's actually going on and what people actually believe in for the holiday period. So, and I think it's really fair to say that some people might feel extra lonely at Christmas. And it's important to be aware of that. So what I like to do is encourage managers and owners to open up the conversation about the holiday season. So just like Sylvie did at the beginning, what's one of your favorite holiday season traditions, right? And you're going to learn something about your employees. And you can have that conversation in December or late November, and then start to incorporate some of those things in, right? So have a day where people, and every Friday, people are going to bring something in that is part of their traditional food that they eat at Christmas. So anything that you can can build in, or in the holiday season, anything that you can build in that feels really inclusive. An opportunity for inviting others over, looking at where do people have places to go, and opening your homes and those types of things for inviting people over of your employees. I don't think you have to invite them all on Christmas Day, but just making a welcoming kind of feel for that. It's really about the balance between the celebration and the capacity and inclusion and empathy. So really recognizing where people are at. I tend to try and tune in and watch for people, how people are doing, right? How are they engaging in conversation? Are they withdrawing from conversations? So getting that idea and having those regular check-ins so you can have conversations about that. And make some notes, right, about what people's traditions are, so you can surprise them next year by remembering what's important to them in the holiday season. I don't know what's on my next slide. Can we flick to that? Perfect. Right. We're talking about reflecting and resetting. So I absolutely love looking at starting a new year. So in Canada, this can actually be the financial year end for people, or it can just be a brand new year. Financial year ends change in Canada, but I know that definitely in the deep of winter is a great time for us to reflect, and we start thinking about what the year will lead ahead to us. And it can be a really great time to think about, what you want to have different, but also to reflect on what's gone really well in the last year. So I think we're always really good at going, oh, I want to do this more, I want to do that more, I want to have this more, but taking an opportunity for yourself and with your employees to go, what did we really crush this year? What can we really be proud of? And I think starting January with that conversation is a great way to start. So what wins can we celebrate? What did we learn? What insights, in what ways have you grown this last year? So often in Canada, we see performance reviews that are sort of done, or check-ins that are done in January. So checking in on the last year, starting the new year, great opportunity to set some new goals and set some new performance plans, but always reflecting on the wins from the last year. I love then taking a moment to reflect on the future with the idea of, what do you want to continue? What do you want to stop doing? What do you want to avoid, right? Like, what do you want to have not exist this next year? And what are your one or two goals of starting, things you want to start? So I think of it as like stop, start, and continue. What am I going to stop doing? What am I going to continue doing? And what am I going to start doing? So I love that part of the New Year's tradition. It doesn't have to be a resolution, but I think it's a real opportunity, especially if you're a business owner, to go, how did things go last year? Okay, what are my focus for this year? And just picking one or two things, because we always tend to pick more than we can actually do. So, and I think on the next slide, we thought we all challenged each other to do a little bit of a quick reflect and reset for the next year, and come up with our personal goals and reflections. And it was a great call out Nicole made. She says, so why don't we share what we're going to do? And so I really thought about it. Growing a business in Canada has been really exciting and really busy this last year. So my reflect is, I'm going to reflect with my team on all the things we've achieved, all the new businesses we're helping. And then I'm going to work on, I have just hired 2 new team members. So I'm really excited to have a little bit more balance this next year and have a little bit more time to take care of myself a little bit more. So that would be my reflect and reset kind of goal. Nicole, what do you have for us?
Nice, thank you. I second everything you said on the work front. Similar to you, as everyone knows, I'm also in sort of growth mode in Australia and onboarding new team members. So I'm going to take this end of year period to really reflect on what worked in my leadership style over the last 4 or 5 months since starting at MyHR. Because when you're fresh and you start a new role and you come in with all the good habits, I want to make sure I hold on to those for 2026, and then realize and also really think about during the busy time, what bad habits have I picked up, and make sure that I don't take them into 2026 with me. On a super personal front, my mother-in-law moved in, and that's been amazing. And I know that's not everyone has that kind of level of support, but I'm reflecting on the more I've let go at home, the more I've actually missed it. So you can't bloody win. I did miss emptying the dishwasher, or I did miss, putting the clothes, hanging the clothes, or doing a school drop off. Turns out a little bit of everything is actually the healthy balance for me. So taking a moment to reflect on what home tasks I'd like to pick back up in 2026, and keeping that balance and finding time for myself in there too. Over to you, Sylvie.
My new role this year has been being a parent. So my job remains the same, but my at-home life has changed radically over the last 6 months with the arrival of our little boy into our world. So this year has been very much about figuring out how to breastfeed, what does he need when he's yelling at me at 2 in the morning, kind of managing a little person in close proximity. And now that I'm back at work, it's been a real joy to be back. I definitely had some sadness or some grief that my kind of time at home with him was ending, but it's been really lovely being back at work and getting a bit more balance in my life rather than being the default parent 24/7. So for next year, or my focus at the moment is really on just managing that balance, making sure that I'm showing up as I need to as a parent at home, and supporting my partner who's taken 6 months of parental leave, and making sure that he gets a break from, again, that kind of default parent status, but also making sure that I'm some of those habits, Nicole, like making sure I'm staying hydrated and staying fed, because if I don't stay hydrated and fed, I may not have a chance to feed myself for 4 hours, right? Because just of the way that my days work. So balance for me is a keyword, which I think has come up for all three of us, actually. So different contexts, but certainly making sure that I'm resourced to enjoy my life and resourced to show up for the people and the work that I care about is a focus for me going into the new year.
Amazing. Let's flip to I think we're closing in our final slides here, which is great. We're just going to talk briefly about each country, just a couple of little reminders around the legislation pieces. Just about 3 minutes left, because we do want to make sure we leave some time for Q&A. So the first slide up is New Zealand. It's you, Sylvie.
All right, so let's get into the nitty gritty of the Holidays Act and managing all that kind of stuff. So we have 4 public holidays coming up in New Zealand. So Thursday the 25th, Friday the 26th of December, and then Thursday the 1st and Friday the 2nd of January. If you've got employees who would normally work on that day, you need to pay them for the public holiday. This applies for people who work like myself, Monday to Friday, pretty standard. If it wasn't Christmas, I would have been working that day, so I get paid for it. If you've got fixed term employees who would normally work the Thursday, Friday, again, you would need to pay them for it. And in some circumstances, you will have casual employees who also would be working those days. If you have a casual employee who genuinely has no work pattern, sometimes they might work 10 hours on a Monday, the next week they might work 4 hours on Thursday and 4 hours on Friday. The next week you won't see them. 2 weeks later, they'll do Monday to Friday, 5 hours every day. In those circumstances, it's really, really unlikely you would need to pay them for the public holiday, because it's unlikely they would have otherwise been working on it. However, if you're in a business like retail, where you might have casual employees who are consistently rostered over the busy season, and they regularly during this time would be working Thursday, Friday, chances are you do need to pay them for that public holiday, even though they're a casual employee. It all comes down to kind of the individual facts for a particular person and looking at their work pattern to see what's in place there. But if you have someone who, if it wasn't Christmas or Boxing Day, would have worked the Thursday, Friday, chances are very high that you'll need to pay them for those 2 public holidays. Get in touch if you have any questions. We're very happy to take a look at specific circumstances, but calling that out because people often think casuals aren't entitled to those public holidays. Most of the time that's true, but it comes down to those working patterns. And annual close downs. A lot of businesses in New Zealand, again, who aren't in those kind of high demand industries, do have annual close downs. You can have one of these a year. And what's special about an annual close down is you can require your employees to take leave for the period of time the business is closing down. This might be your entire business. Everyone shuts up shop for 2 weeks. This could be parts of your business. Maybe your back office staff, you have a couple of people working through, but your manufacturing team just totally switch off because there's kind of no orders coming through. Whether it's your whole business, parts of the business, or kind of bits and pieces here and there, by law, you have to give at least 2 weeks notice to your employees that you're implementing a close down, and explain what this means for their leave balances and for their leave. So there's no cap on how long your close down can be. There's no sort of minimum length of time. It could be 1 week, it could be 6 weeks, but you are required to communicate it in writing at least 2 weeks out from the close down starting. We're currently the 19th of November, so obviously plenty of time before that Christmas squeeze really comes into place. If you aren't already thinking about this, do get in touch with the team. We can help you prepare the letters and answer any questions you have about the effect on leave, because there is a bit of a trick here in terms of people who've been with the business and for how long their length of service is and what happens to their leave balances. So if you have someone who's been with your business for less than 12 months, so their annual leave hasn't clicked into that entitlement piece yet, they're still just earning their leave accrual. If there is a close down, you're required to pay them out all of their leave at 8% of gross earnings to cover them for that period of time, even if they have 3 weeks of accrual and your close down's only 1 week. It's a quirk of the law. It's tricky to implement. So if you do have people who have been working with you for less than 12 months, be aware there are some weird pieces in there around leave and a close down. If you've got someone who's been working for more than 12 months and so they have leave accrual, you're just requiring them to take leave to cover the time they actually would be away. So any questions about that, you're welcome to pop them through. We always get a few through every year because it is a bit of a kind of tricky mechanical piece of the Holidays Act. But I'll pass over to Nicole to talk about Australia and pick up any questions in the Q&A. Over to you, Nicole.
Thank you. I think I've said this already ad nauseum. Modern Awards. So checking Modern Awards for most of them, in fact, all of them have an annual shutdown clause. And in there it says things like you need to give X amount of notice. Usually that's 4 weeks. You need to do that in writing. You can, ask people to take annual leave. There are some specific requirements in each Modern Award. So if you're covered by a Modern Award, please check that. Our customers will be having us around this time check Modern Awards and prepare close down communication or shutdown, close down, whichever term we're using. That's either, again, talking points as a script as well as a written piece of communication for their organisation. And in that, we put some frequently asked questions. What happens if my leave balance is in the negative? Or is non-existent? Do I go into a negative annual leave? Do we want that sort of liability on our books? Make sure you check that with your finance team. Or do we expect people to take unpaid leave? What if someone's saving their holiday? We have this one a lot. Saving my annual leave for a 6-week wedding 6-week break, honeymoon, wedding, the works. Can I please work through the Christmas period because I'm trying to save my annual leave? Going back to Sylvie's slide a few minutes ago or a bit longer than that, if you have genuine work for them and you want to make that approval by exception, approving someone to work but they're actually doing productive work, whether that's project work or on-call or something, and you're applying it in a fair way across all of the requests, then that's something you might want to consider as well. And lastly, for close downs, are you the type of business who needs to have on-call arrangements? And that's everybody in every industry, not just the types of industries we've touched on today, but even in the tech sector, for example, and those companies who work online or remotely, and we'll touch on that. I can see a question about that sector or that way of working has come in. It's about, do I need to be on call? Do I need to have someone on call in my business? What does that look like from a Fair Work compliance and Modern Award compliance? Do I pay you for that on-call time? Or do I give you a time in lieu instead, a day in lieu instead? How do I treat that time? And what happens if you do get a phone call and you need to jump online and do the work? What are the expectations? Obviously, make sure you have internet, make sure you have access to a laptop. You're not, camping in the middle of nowhere. I did that last year when I was on call, but I made sure I had a Starlink and an internet connection and I wasn't drinking and I was properly on call. So making sure you have those arrangements is very important, and understanding whether you need it or not. With that said, I'm going to throw it back to you, Julie, for a Canada overview.
Yeah, I think the hardest part in Canada, and you both kind of spoken to it, is who gets paid over the holidays and how much do they get paid over the holidays, and it is very complicated, and each situation is a little bit different. It's less about in Canada, it's less about the type of employee you are, and it's more about how many days have you worked in the previous 30. So the rule of thumb is, have you worked 15 days in the previous 30? If you have, you're entitled to stat holiday pay, which means you're either getting a day off and actually getting the hours paid. But if you actually work that day, you're getting across Canada, it's different amounts, but in BC, it's 1.5 times plus another day off in lieu. So it can be very expensive to be open on a stat holiday, and expensive to actually have your employees work. So wherever possible, which I know isn't possible for everyone, is to actually not have people working on the stat holidays. We just wrote a really interesting blog on carrying over vacation that you can find on the MyHR Canada site, because how you manage vacation is something that comes up all the time in Canada, and our leave balances tend to reset on January 1st. So that is definitely something that is interesting, and Nicole mentioned it a little bit, that idea of do we have to pay out vacation? Can we take it away? And really, you'll read in that article that the key is having a very clear policy. You do not have to carry over vacation, but if you're not going to carry it over, you need to be explicit about it. And same if you're not going to pay it out. So lots of information there, just things to be aware of around that. And you really want to have a plan of what your expectations with how vacation is managed. And then, yeah, lots of employees, similar to the other countries, is, actually choosing to close your office between Christmas and New Year's. And ideally, so this might be something like a dentist office where the dentist isn't going to work. Therefore, you don't need the hygienist to work. Ideally, you're going to, like I say, give notice, like Sylvie and Nicole mentioned. And then the employee has an option to either use their paid vacation or take unpaid leave. So those are a bunch of options that happen in between there. But yeah, the vacation piece and who's being paid for public holidays are probably the trickiest two pieces that come up in Canada. And again, we're happy to answer any specifics about those. And there is that blog that has some great information about it. Awesome. I think we are open to our Q&A. So we've got some good questions coming in here, and I think I will have a read through and put them out to the group. How does that sound? Everyone good with that?
I'm happy to
Awesome.
facilitate, Julie, if you'd like to. I'm super easy.
Okay, well, I think there's going to be, I'm going to get you to answer the question about, I've got one right here for you, Sylvie, so why don't I go ahead? So regarding getting your people home safely, if the team takes a responsibility to kick on into town the night or the post-events, drinks and dinner, how does that fit with getting your people home safely? Do you want to speak about that in New Zealand? And I'll add anything for Canada and Nicole, Australia, if need be.
Yeah, absolutely. So the piece around getting people home if they've chosen to kick on is a bit of a tricky one. You don't have responsibility for what people choose to do in their own time, and as most of the time. And as long as you've made it clear that the work associated function goes from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. at the restaurant, you'll get people safely to the function and then safely either home or to the office, depending on the circumstances from the restaurant. If people choose to kick on after that, you can say, hey, what you guys choose to do in your own time's up to you. We're not funding it. We're not arranging transport to and from. You're kind of in your own time. Most of the time, that will be okay. The tricky thing is there are some circumstances where, the short answer is you're not responsible for getting people home if they've chosen to kind of carry on and paint the town red afterwards. What's tricky is that because they are out after a work function, and presumably everyone who's there will be colleagues and will work together. If shit goes down, there are circumstances where you may need to step in and consider disciplinary action if someone's behaved inappropriately. It's hard to talk about specifics because it sort of depends, again, on the facts of the situation. But most of the time, as long as you've really clearly communicated your intention to bookend the work function, getting people there safely, will have dinner and drinks or, whatever it is. From when dinner ends, we'll either get people back to the office or we'll, pay for a taxi or an Uber home. That's sort of the end of your responsibilities. There are some circumstances where you will need to get involved if something further goes down, but that obviously depends a lot on the details.
Amazing. Thanks, Sylvie. Same in Canada. That just calling an end to the event and, saying that you're really reiterating that it's an expectation that people get home safety and this is what you can provide. So whether it be Uber or whatever it is so even if people live further away, it's really pre-thinking that out for people and putting that budget aside for Uber potentially. Awesome. There's another question here about working on people that work completely remotely. So not a lot about what they wanted to know about that, but I'm sure we can share a few thoughts on what we've talked about today and how that would apply to complete remote workers. Would either of you like to take that question on?
Yeah, there was a comment later on about that ideally being for some New Zealand context. So why don't I
Oh,
start? And
great.
if there's kind of
Yeah.
key pieces I missed, then the two of you can jump in. Um, so it's really, really hard to build company culture when you're working remotely, right? You don't have the face-to-face time. You don't have the opportunity to get into a meeting room and hash something out. So we have to work a lot harder for employees or when we're a business who works remotely to make sure that we're keeping those connections and keeping those relationships alive. At MyHR, we have some employees who work remotely. We've got a colleague in Cambridge, we've got a colleague in Whangarei, and they don't have an office there, right? They work from their home offices and we pull them into head office when we need to. So in terms of your legal obligations, all of the same Holidays Act stuff applies, which I imagine you would expect. They get public holidays off if they would normally work them. If they want to take annual leave around this time, same deal. You can close down and require that your working from home employees don't work over this time. So all of that's standard and straightforward. In terms of managing some of the cultural connection pieces when you have people working remotely, I would say that a lot of the stuff that we've talked about today would apply. So if they're not going to be that busy, make sure they've got projects and stuff to keep them going while they're working alone and all of their colleagues are offline. If you do have a busy period, make sure you've got time to check in with them and make sure that they've got what they need. If you know that they have some personal circumstances that make this time of year a bit difficult for whatever reason, make sure that you're, again, taking care of them and making sure you know, or at least you understand what it is that they need to help alleviate any additional stresses they might be facing. So a lot of it, I think, would be pretty consistent. I'm totally happy to speak to any specific concerns that you might have otherwise. But yeah, Nicole, Julie, anything I've missed there that you think would be critical for remote workers?
I think it's even
Nicole?
more, thanks, Julie. Just a small comment from me, which is it's even more prudent and important to check in on those well-being pieces and the one-on-one conversations around how people feel around the holidays, because you're not getting that temperature check from, the water cooler conversation or the quick chat in the kitchen or whatever it is in the office. So being a lot more actually mindful in having that conversation around what people are, how people feel about this period, what they're looking forward to. And the other comment I'd make is there are lots of cool online. If you're not planning on coming together to celebrate in person, thinking back to COVID days, we did a lot of team building activities online. So there's great ideas that you can do something, and it could be very cost effective all online with your team as well.
A great call out there, Nicole. That was something that was kind of coming to my mind, like remember everyone gets a recipe and the groceries and you're cooking something together online. So just because everyone's remote doesn't mean there doesn't have to be any like opportunity to celebrate or treat people, make people feel special. So yeah, I love that. Awesome. I'm not seeing a whole lot. Is there any other questions coming through? Sylvia, are you seeing anything there that we should answer? Yeah, go ahead, Sylvie.
I've made it difficult for you by answering or checking in on a couple of people, so they're showing up in the answered space. So I might run through and just cover off a couple that I flagged would be responded to, but obviously now I've hidden them from you. So Kathy had a specific question for Australia, Nicole. This one's for you. Kia ora, Kathy. Thank you for asking. Are we required to get staff back to the office safely or back home? Some staff live a long way away.
It depends on, I know Kathy had to drop off, so I'll make sure we get the answer to her as well. But it really depends on what type of event we're talking about. For example, if the event ends at 10 p.m., getting them to the office at 10 p.m. is not ideal because that means they still need to get home from the office at 10 p.m. And if they live far away, in the Australian context, I'm thinking trains, if it's an evening event, trains and buses and all the public transport is either super busy during this time of year or not available at this time, in which case you need to think about whether an Uber home or a taxi or whatever the case may be is the way to go. But you do have a responsibility to make sure that they have a plan and that you financially help fund that plan to get them home safely. That's still part of your responsibility, given that you've put this event on. But it doesn't have to be a $300 Uber for someone who lives far away. It could be, I'm happy to catch the train if it's, an event that finishes at a time where there's public transport still available, for example. We have had this next bit that I'm about to say is completely at your discretion, and I can appreciate that could be a costly event, but I have worked in organizations where, given what time the event ended and how far people had to travel, we've decided to give them accommodation. So paid for their hotel overnight in the city or wherever the event is, and then obviously make sure they made their way home safely the next morning. So yeah, there's some options there for you to consider, Kathy.
Especially too, just to add to that, Nicole, if you have people coming from multiple locations, right? So if you've got, as that piece earlier from Lee was talking about, if you've got people working remotely who you're flying in or you're busing into a head office location, if you've got people from multiple sites all coming together, it would be really irresponsible to whack someone on a plane at 3 a.m. to fly back to Sydney or to fly back to Whanganei or to fly back to Toronto. So making sure you've got those local options available is often a sensible choice in those circumstances. Okay. A question, Julie, for you. Let me just jump down. Did you say, from Stephen, did you say that those who have not completed 15 of 30 previous days who work the day of the stat are entitled to an additional day of vacation? And you've written the answer out, but maybe just sharing the details here would be useful.
So no, employees do not get stat holiday pay if they've not worked 15 of the previous 30. So this is where that casual kind of employee comes in, or your very part-time employee comes in. So working a stat holiday, if they're very part-time, they're only working 1 or 2 shifts of work, they would not get stat holiday pay. So that's what is very helpful in a seasonal workforce. However, if you have people working, every day, even if they're on for a seasonal job, once they've made it through that first 15 days out of the 30, they are going to get that stat holiday pay. So just really want to be paying attention to, who you're scheduling for what, not to try and avoid it, just to make sure that your employees that are, that are your year-round employees are getting that stat holiday pay, and those that are more casual and are filling in the holidays you do not need to pay stat holiday pay for that. Yeah. And then, Sylvia, there's one more there. Are we best to use the MyHR portal to inform employees of the details of the Christmas holidays, so they can accept the terms? That is a great use of the MyHR portal. So we see lots of people that do. Nicole, you would see this as well. The annual notice of close down. We help draft that letter of the annual notice of close down. It can go out as early as September for the holiday period, and then the document acceptance goes through. So love seeing that. That all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, and a really great way to make sure your employees have seen and accepted that information. So great, Sherilyn. Great call out there.
And look, last question here from Michelle, and we're at 11:58, so I'll do my best to get it done in a minute and a half so we can do our sign off. So Michelle had a question about paying the 8% accrual during a close down period. If we have salaried employees who have not been employed for 12 months, do we have to do this? I understand that this will change the anniversary date. Yes, great question, Michelle. So if you have an employee who has worked for you for fewer than 12 months on the date of your shutdown starting, whether they are a waged employee or a salaried employee, that law about paying out the 8% accrual applies. So yes, you will have to do that if they're a salaried person, whether they work full-time or part-time. And yes, it will change their anniversary date. You do have some flexibility in terms of when that new anniversary date is. Typically, it's just the first day of the close down, because that kind of keeps all your dates and pieces aligned. But if it's a day that's nearby and it is more convenient for whatever reason, you can choose a different date for that close down, for that new anniversary date. So yes, you will need to do this for salaried employees who haven't yet been employed for 12 months. Cool. Well, look, that's all of us. I think we did an extraordinary job, and thanks everyone for your questions, answering questions across 3 different territories. Thank you for bearing with us as we tried a new format. I would love to do this again in future. Nicole and Julie are both much more experienced and smarter than I am, so bringing their voices to these sorts of sessions, I think, is fabulous, especially for our New Zealand audiences. So thank you so much again for joining us. Just a couple of quick bonus resources before we sign off. There'll be an email that comes out to you at the end of the session with a link to the recording and a couple of extra pieces from us. So first is a reflect and reset checklist, which you can use with yourself and your team to go through and do some of that 2025, 2026 kind of thinking and planning we talked about earlier. And there'll also be some links to my calendar, to Julie's calendar, and to Nicole's calendar if you would like a complimentary 15-minute consultation with any of us to talk about any of the issues that have come up in this session. If that sparked any thoughts for you, you're very welcome to get in touch. So email is coming out with all of the resources. If you don't receive it in the next 48 hours, let us know, but it will come out in the next day or so. And then just a big thank you from us. I so appreciate Julie and Nicole, you joining me on the session. It's been lovely to have you here. And thank you to everyone who signed in from 3 countries and 3 different time zones. Or more time zones, actually, thinking about where people might be joining from. It's been a joy. So thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Sylvie.
Thanks, Nicole. And
Thanks,
thank you all for
everyone.
attending. It's been lovely.
Have a good Christmas and holiday period.
Exactly. Awesome.
Excellent. We'll see you all in 2026.